This video is sponsored by WREN. More on them later. My book is now available on Amazon. This is my baby. Go ahead. Yeah, check it out. Lila's Big Sky. Hello everyone, it's Maria and welcome to my channel. For this video I decided to do something a little bit different. I am gonna look for a list on the internet with like, I don't know, like the best books about the ocean ever or something like that. And I'm going to select 5 of those books to read and share my thoughts with you. I have 2 rules. 1, no kids or picture books and no textbooks like, you know, university actually I have 3 rules. I'm also not going to be reading books that I've already read and talked about here on the channel. I already have 2 book videos that I will leave linked down below, so any books in those videos I am not going to include in this one. Let's look for a list. Best ocean books ever. I also want a recent list, like the most recent list I can find. I want to include recent books because there's a higher chance I haven't read them. So let's go. Okay, 21. Oh, it's from Oprah Daily, and it's from 2020. So relatively all right. Let's check that one out. 21 awesome books for anyone who loves the ocean. That's us. From beachside thrillers to nonfiction reads. That's us. Yeah, I'm going to select 5. Okay, thank you, Elena Nicolau, who is the author of this list. I'm gonna order these books. One of them I actually already have, and let's start reading. Okay, we have the books. I have selected 2 nonfiction books, 1 fiction, 1 memoir, and 1 for animal lovers. That's how it was classified in the list. I'm assuming it's nonfiction about whales. Don't know why I think that. I just have a feeling for these things. I'm going to start with The Outlaw Ocean by Urbina. I already had this book and I actually already read parts of it. This is a nonfiction book. Urbina is a journalist and basically this is a years-long investigation about what happens in the ocean when no one is looking. And let's start. Let's go. Let's do that. Blah. I've just finished reading this book yesterday and wow. I rarely find myself not wanting to put a nonfiction book down, and that happened to me with this book. And it's not a short book, mind you. It's 400 pages. It's not a short book, and yet I couldn't put it down. I've already explained what this book is about. It is about what happens in the ocean as a result of lack of regulation and lack of law enforcement and corruption. It does tackle some sensitive issues. It talks about slavery, it talks about human trafficking, it talks about animal cruelty. It's not necessarily a fun, easy read, especially when you realize that everything you're reading is true, but it's a super interesting book. The way Urbina managed to incorporate himself also in the stories that he was telling. It's phenomenal, honestly. I am not a journalist. I don't think I'm someone who is supposed to evaluate journalistic material, but if I were to analyze it with my limited knowledge, I would say this is a fantastic piece of journalism. The storytelling is incredible. Each chapter talks about different aspects of the outlaw ocean, always through the perspective of the people who are involved in the story, but at the same time also through Urbina's perspective as he is investigating these stories, because there are certain instances in which his own life is kind of at stake because of the things he is investigating. I don't want to spoil because there are some stories in here that do feel like thriller stories. It feels like you're reading a thriller, that it's just that it's real and it's told by the person who lived those things. If you cannot tell, I really recommend this book. I think it's really well written. It's not a lyrical, you know, Shakespearean sort of writing. It's a journalistic type of writing. It's just, yeah, if you are someone who cares about the world and environmental issues, humanitarian issues, political issues, corruption, poverty, you name it, it's all in there. I think this is a really important read, one that took me on a ride. I learned a lot, and there's things in here that I'm like, how did I not know this? I'm someone who works with the ocean every day. For many years, and there's things in here that I never even thought happened, or I never even crossed my mind, you know, that's just fantastic. 5 out of 5 stars. Recommendation full, yes. That was heavy. I think this is the next book I'm gonna read, and it's The Gift from the Sea by Morrow Lindbergh. I've seen this book recommended, it's in so many lists. It's really small. I love the cover, beautiful. Curious to see if it's beautiful. I think the inside is also, let's see, because this is not usually the type of books I gravitate towards. I don't really usually like reading self-reflective books. I do like self-reflection for the win, and I do try to self-reflect myself. For some reason, I never read books about a person's own thoughts and stuff unless there's some sort of story behind it. I don't know why, it's just not something I really usually pick up, so I'm excited to see if this book changes that. So let's start. Hi, it's been a while since, well, for you it's been a second, for me it's been probably 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I don't know. I finished reading The Gift from the Sea already a while ago. So this book is an interesting one. As I said before, this is not really the type of book I usually gravitate towards. This is a stream of conscience written by Morrow Lindbergh while she was on a solo vacation in the seaside. On the seaside. At the seaside? At the seaside. And while she's there, she compares her current life and a lot of the things she thinks about with things she finds on the beach, like shells, animals, etc., etc. I will say it's a very beautifully written book. Love it. Morrow Lindbergh, when she wrote this book, was a married American woman with 5 kids in the 50s. I am none of these things. In that way, I cannot really relate to the things she was experiencing, but somehow it still really spoke to me, and I think that's what makes this book very interesting, and I still enjoyed reading it. Also, it's really short, so I read it in one sitting. It was a very interesting window into the mind of a woman who was clearly not happy with what society expected from her at the time she wrote this book. So she talks a lot about what's expected from women, especially during these times. They were supposed to be always available to help, that they were not expected to want to be alone. They were always expected to be pleasant and nice and take care of the household and be like multitasking, doing all sorts of things everywhere and still work sometimes. So she clearly struggled a lot with not having time for herself and feeling like she didn't have an identity outside of being there for other people. And I could relate to this woman so well and sympathize with her and how she felt, especially as someone who needs to be alone. I love being alone and I love doing things alone. She seems like someone who was generally satisfied with her life, but she clearly missed this time and a chance for, you know, self-improvement and learning about herself. I love this book because of that. I also love the little analogies with the things she would find on the beach. You don't necessarily feel bad after reading this. It might seem like that would be the case with what I am telling you, but it's not. It's a book that is it's more a reflection of what it means to be with yourself and how important that is for the self in the context of being an American woman in the 50s who's the mother of 5 kids and a wife. If this is the type of thing you would gravitate towards, I definitely recommend this book. I would have never picked this book up if it weren't for this video, and it was a pleasant surprise. I really also like the fact that there's a little section at the end where she kind of gives an update, you know, because the book was written when was this written? In 1955, and she wrote, so then she wrote like an extra chapter 20 years later. So in the 70s, things changed a lot during those 20 years, and she acknowledges this on her little, you know, she reflects back on what she wrote and the state of the world, especially regarding the place of women in society And I think they're cool. So yeah, I recommend this introspective piece. It was lovely. It's really a fast read. There you go. All right, this was such a fast read that I also already read The Water Will Come by Jeff Goodell. I am butchering these names. Goodell or Goodell? Goodell. This was the book I was the least excited to read from the entire list. And the reason is its topic. It's a book, as you can probably imagine, about what will happen when the water comes after the ice sheets melt and the ocean rises. I knew this book was about climate change, and I also knew it was about what would happen to cities once the sea level rises. But there was something I was not expecting, and it's that this book went into great detail on specific cities. Jeff Goodell went to different cities and talked to people responsible for evaluating the sea level rise situation and what was being done about it, or in most situations what was not being done about it. And he investigates quite thoroughly the politics and the economics behind why things are being done or not in these cities. The city he focuses the most is Miami, because it is one of those cities that is it will be flooded at some point in the next 200 years probably, according to predictions. At least a part of it, the one that's closest to the sea. I thought this was very interesting. It's a different type of book than what I usually read regarding this topic. Normally what I read is more scientific related, and this was very much more economy and politically oriented. This is a book I would definitely recommend anyone to read, if not simply because of its importance. This was very enlightening, kind of scary. You know, for me, I feel comfort when I understand things. Somehow that makes me accept things better. Understanding why sometimes things are done or not kind of made me understand why, but it also made me understand that, read it. He doesn't only talk about Miami, by the way. He goes to several coastal cities around the world that are expected to be heavily impacted by sea level rise. So it's an interesting book. There were some parts that for me were a bit more difficult to get through, simply because I was not as interested in the more technical parts of the things he was describing. But it was not like I couldn't finish reading it or I was totally bored. It was still all right, but that's why I think I would give this like a 4.5 stars and 5 stars. Anyways, it's a really great book and a very important one, and definitely recommend. And the next book I am going to read is The Island of Sea Women by Liza C. maybe. I love this cover. I usually don't like covers with people on them, but I like this one very much. It's very beautiful, very graceful and underwater-y. I read a book from Liza C already that I really liked. I think I even have it here. The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. I really enjoyed this book, and I'm excited to read this one. Hi, again, it's me. Surprise! Right, it hasn't been that long actually since you last saw me. It's been a second, and for me it's been a week. I already read these two books. I read both these books in 1 week. Yeah, let's talk about that. So the first book I read was The Island of Sea Women by Liza C. Now, this book, my goodness. Hi, Future Maria here. So I think at that point, the part of my brain responsible for constructing coherent English sentences went on holidays. Oh my god, I do hope those holidays were worth it, because I'm gonna have to repeat everything. This book is based on reality and on real historical events. This book follows our main protagonist, Young-suk. Young-suk is a woman living in Jeju Island in the south of Korea, and the main focus of the story is her friendship with Miya. They both come from very different backgrounds and have a very different status in their community, but they develop a very strong friendship when they're kids that lasts through their part of their life until something happens. And that's as much as I can say without going into spoilers. This book also explores the story and the culture of the Haenyeo. And I definitely looked up how to say that word. The Haenyeo are a group of female divers that provide for their families by harvesting seafood. They live in a Sea&me matriarchal society where women provide and the man stay at home taking care of the kids and the household. So already that premise is very interesting because it's one that you rarely see in real life and in stories. So the Haenyeo are highly regarded in Jeju and in their community. And Young-suk is the daughter of the chief Haenyeo of her town. Minya, on the other hand, is the daughter of a collaborator. The story starts in the late 1930s, while Korea was occupied by the Japanese, and collaborators were Koreans that collaborated with the Japanese. And they were usually not very well seen by other Koreans. And Mia was the daughter of such a person. She was the daughter of a collaborator. And at the beginning of the book, her dad had just passed away. She never met her mom, and she was adopted by her uncle and aunt who live in the community where Young-suk lives as well. And that's how they meet and develop their friendship. So you have on one hand someone who is highly regarded by society, who is the daughter of the chief Haenyeo, one of the most important positions in the community. And then you have someone who is sort of an outcast and not very welcomed in society because she is the daughter of a collaborator. I think this makes their friendship even more beautiful, and I love reading about it. I love friendship stories, and I find that many times friendship stories fall very flat. This was definitely not the case for this one. I really enjoyed this story. However, this book focuses a lot on two other things as well: the story and culture of the Haenyeo and the history of Jeju Island. I loved reading about the Haenyeo. I didn't know these women existed. They still exist today. Women goals, queens, I don't know, I love it. I love their connection to the sea. I love how they respect what they collect. I don't know, it's just a very intriguing culture, and I loved reading about it. The other aspect that the book really focuses on is the history of Jeju Island. Throughout the book, we are following Young-suk's life, and her life is obviously connected to what happens in Jeju Island. We follow what happens in Jeju Island during the Japanese occupation, then the American occupation, and after that, the creation of South Korea. This book becomes very violent. Trigger warnings for crimes of war, homicide, infanticide, sexual assault, and anything you can imagine related to war crimes. I've really liked learning about these events. I had a brief idea of Korea's history, but I had no idea about some of the things that happen in the book, and now I do. And thank you very much for that, Liza C. I feel that I know a bit more about history now. I really enjoyed these three aspects of the book: Young-suk's and Minya's friendship, the history of Jeju Island, and the Haenyeo's culture. But it took me a while to really get into it, and I think the reason for that was Young-suk herself. Liza C clearly wanted to explore Haenyeo's culture and write about their lifestyle and their society, and also the relationships within these communities. And she created Young-suk as this perfect wannabe Haenyeo. She is everything a young Haenyeo ought to be. She likes everything she's supposed to like. She does everything she's supposed to do. She's like the perfect daughter and the perfect baby Haenyeo. And while I think that's a smart way to introduce the culture of this island and the Haenyeo, I think it made the story itself at the beginning a bit less engaging. I was enjoying reading about these women and about this island, but I was not very invested in the story and in the characters themselves until Young-suk's and Minya's friendship become the core of the story. Because then there's an added layer of personality to Young-suk that I really enjoyed reading about. After that point, I just couldn't stop reading. I'm both a plot and character-driven reader, but if the focus of a book is definitely on the characters need to be engaging. And I felt that at the beginning, the main character wasn't. Then she becomes interesting later on. This book broke my heart. I loved having the perspective of younger Young-suk and older Young-suk and how these two timelines at the end combine. Yeah, I still love the book and I still highly recommend. Just pay attention to the trigger warnings. Let's go back to Past Maria. I think at this point, half of the part of my brain that went on holidays was back. So let's go. Yeah, overall, I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I would give the first half 4 stars, the second half 5. So that would round up actually to 4.5. So yeah, 4.5 stars to The Island of Sea Women. I learned a lot from this book. I was not expecting to learn history from this book or to learn about a completely new culture of diving women. Like, whoa. That was not expected and I really loved it. The last book I read, I finished reading this today. Spying on Whales by Pyenson. Why do I choose books with complicated author names? Or not complicated, just author names that I can't pronounce. So Pyenson is a paleontologist who specializes in whales. This book is definitely told by someone who focuses on the past. What do I mean by this? Not in a negative way. The book is divided in 3 sections, the past, present, and future, but each section has a little bit of an evolutionary component, which makes sense because he's a paleontologist, which means he studies these animals in the past, and that's his main focus. That's his main research interest. And I really like that because there's a person element to it. He includes himself in the stories he's telling. He starts talking about whale facts and whale research while he is doing the research himself. So he uses things that happened in his life while he was investigating a specific fossil or investigating specific aspects of whale evolution to elaborate on certain topics. And I really like that. So I really liked the middle and the ending of the book. I just think that there could have been a better hook at the beginning. But overall, I learned a lot. Like, I thought I knew a lot about whales, but it turns out I didn't know anything about the whales from the past or whale evolution, which is what this book mostly focuses on. I was not expecting to learn as much as I did reading this. There's not much more I can say, except that if you like whales, if you like paleontology, if you like learning cool things about animals, read this book. It's a fun one. There are even like some cool little drawings along the way, you see. Yeah, and it's interesting too because Pyenson works at the Smithsonian Museum, which has some of the largest fossil collections in the world. And he also talks about, which for me was personally interesting, a bit how his research with the museum, like he touches a bit on, you know, the inner works of research and having to allocate time sometimes to things that are not necessarily the things you want to allocate time to. And that was also interesting, but I think that's just because I've been there and I relate. Gah! We have reached the end. My God, I started this video how long ago? I don't know. And we've made it. I liked all of these books. Congratulations, Oprah Daily. Thank you very much. So this person has a good taste. I approve. So, yeah, I recommend all these books. And if you end up reading them, or if you have read any of them, let me know down below. I love talking about books, if you can't tell. I love discussing ideas and knowing what people think about books that I really enjoyed or books that I didn't enjoy, which was not the case for any of these books. Let's take a minute to thank WREN for their great work. This is already the 4th time WREN is sponsoring a video of mine because I truly believe in what they do. WREN is a website where you can calculate your carbon footprint, and then you can offset it by contributing to carbon reduction projects. WREN works with a lot of different projects around the world with local communities, which I think is absolutely necessary for projects like these. But most of all, they donate 10% of your donations to groups that work with climate policy, which for me is one of the most important things, because nothing will be done without policy being involved. They are very transparent with where your money goes to. They give you regular updates on each of the projects you are funding. If you want to contribute to these projects and offset your carbon footprint, check out the link in my description below. The first 100 people who sign up using the link will have 10 extra trees planted in their name. Thank you, WREN, for the great work and for sponsoring today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to my Patreons, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.